Hello, it's Jamie from Beacon Consultant Services. Thanks for tuning into our 17th video on the A to Z of GDPR. Today we're going to be focusing on R for retention. Now we've talked about retention briefly in previous videos, but we're going to dive into it in a bit more detail now and look at this principle and how long is necessary and some of the benefits of sticking to retention periods. Now the principle fundamentally says you must not keep personal data for longer than you need it. So it's important to understand how long you should hold personal data for, but the GDPR doesn't specify how long you should keep it for, just that it shouldn't be kept for longer than is necessary. So it's down to an organisation to determine what's necessary. So there are certain factors you consider when thinking about whether or not you need the personal data. So firstly, think about whether you need to keep the data in the form that allows the identification of the individual. If you don't, then you should anonymise the data so that the individual can't be identified. But make sure you fully anonymise the data so there's no chance that the data could lead you back to that individual at a later date. If you do need to keep the data in an identifiable form, then consider the following points when looking at how long you should keep it for. So firstly, has the purpose been fulfilled? Now you'd have obtained or processed the personal data for a specific purpose, so does that purpose still apply? Do you need to keep a record of the relationship once the relationship is ended? So you may need to keep hold of some of the personal data with regards to that relationship, but probably not all of it, so think about what you do need to keep and delete what isn't necessary. And consider whether you may need to defend against possible future legal claims. Now again, only keep in the relevant data and not the unnecessary. And do you have any legal or regulatory requirements which means you need to keep the data for a set period? So you may need the data to fulfill tax obligations or health and safety, for example. And are there any relevant industry standards or guidelines? So for example, the ICO have agreed with credit reference agencies that they're permitted to keep consumer credit data for 6 years. So based on what we've talked about already, you need to have retention policies in place. These will document the decisions that you've made around the retention periods for different categories of information you hold, and will cover the types of information you hold, what you use it for, how long you intend to keep it for. I'd also suggest capturing why you've landed on the period of time for retention to help you justify your decision should you ever be challenged. Now when you come to the end of the retention period, you should carry out a review to determine if you need that personal data. If you don't, erase it and anonymise the data, or anonymise the data. If you do, then capture a clear justification as to why you need to keep it for longer. And if you can't think of a reason why you need the data, well then you should really be asking yourself whether or not you need it at all. Now I've worked with a lot of organisations that find this a bit of a sticking point and adopt the mentality of just in case. We'll keep the data just in case we need it. So it's worth considering some of the benefits of data retention as well and removing data when you no longer need it. And we'll look at those now. So there'll be reduced storage costs. So holding on to lots and lots of personal data may be costly. So removing that data once the retention period has been reached could reduce your storage costs. You can avoid breaches to the principles, so take for example principle 1 around lawfulness, fairness, transparency, and if you're acting outside of your privacy policy which says you're going to be keeping that personal data for a set period and you keep it for longer, then you could be breaching that principle. And remember, for as long as you hold the data, you have a responsibility for it. So if someone invoked their right of access, you'd also need to send any information to them that is outside of your retention period. So if you've kept hold of a lot of information that you don't need past the retention period, then that would be captured under that subject access request. So there you have it. That's R for retention. Please join us for our next video, which will be on S for security. Thank you.